to reform a soul like mine, one practically born from malice. The chairman of the underworld swore he'd find me the perfect family for my next life. And so, I became Caleb Hayes, the adored and only son of the Hayes dynasty. My parents were loving, and my grandparents treated me like their own heart. There was just one problem: my adopted brother, Ethan. He was already 5 when I was born, and he saw me as the viper in his Eden. In front of our parents, he was the perfect, caring older brother. But behind closed doors, he'd wrap his small hands around my throat and whisper, "Why did you have to come and steal everything from me?" As my vision started to fade, I smiled. Well, this was just perfect. It wasn't that I wanted to be a monster, but it seemed someone was hell-bent on making me one. If he wanted to play, I was ready to play for keeps. 1. I still remember the negotiation in the chairman's grand, gloomy office. A cosmic delinquent like you should be barred from the cycle of rebirth for all eternity. The chairman was so furious his spectral mustache was practically vibrating. The tip of his pen, the one he used to sign souls into oblivion, nearly poked me in the nose. Or rather, the soul I used to be just shrugged. Whatever. Hell's not so different from my own backyard. I'll manage. My indifference left him speechless. He flipped through the great ledger of my lives, its pages dense with the chronicles of my achievements. At 3, I poisoned a neighbor's rooster for crowing too loud. At 7, I burned my tutor's priceless, one-of-a-kind manuscript. At 15, I manipulated 2 nations into a war that cost countless lives. The summary was simple. I was a menace. He stared at the book for a long time before slamming it shut, as if making a monumental decision. No, I refuse to believe you can't be reformed. This time, I'm sending you to a family overflowing with love, devoted parents, a harmonious home, a life of absolute luxury. Let's see you try to be evil when you're drowning in affection. I cleaned out my ear, unimpressed. If a soul born from mayhem could be reformed, would it really be born from mayhem in the first place? The world went black, then burst into light. My ears were filled with a chorus of joyful, muffled voices. I forced my eyes open and met a gaze so gentle it could have melted steel. A woman's weak but ecstatic voice washed over me. "My baby, my sweet baby. Let mommy see you." Well then, reincarnation complete. I was Caleb Hayes, the bona fide family treasure. The Hayes family was the real deal, a blue-blooded dynasty with a portfolio that spanned the country. My father was the CEO, sharp and commanding. My mother was a renowned artist, elegant and kind. My grandfather, though retired, was a titan whose influence still echoed through boardrooms. My grandmother, a former debutante, was the very definition of grace. And I was the sole male heir of my generation, the absolute center of their universe. They truly loved me. This wasn't just lip service. My mother wanted to hold me 24 hours a day. My father, a man of intimidating seriousness, made a beeline to kiss my cheek the moment he got home. My grandparents doted on me relentlessly, showering me with anything and everything. This feeling of being cocooned in such intense love. It was unfamiliar, but not entirely unpleasant. If it weren't for Ethan. Ethan was the child my parents had adopted 5 years prior. They had thought they couldn't conceive and took him in, a sympathetic case from a broken home. The year I was born, he had just turned 5. The kid was a prodigy of deception from the start. In front of our parents, he was the most considerate, loving, and protective big brother a boy could ask for. He'd bring Mom a glass of water, make a clumsy show of trying to help Dad with his briefcase, and lean over my crib, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mom, Dad, isn't Caleb the cutest? I love him so much." Every performance earned him a round of applause. "Ethan, you're so sweet. What a wonderful boy. Our Caleb will always have his big brother to protect him." But only I saw the ice in his eyes when he turned away, a coldness that didn't belong on a child's face. Only I felt the quick, vicious pinch on my arm or the painful twist of my leg when no one was looking. Usually, I'd just give a lazy yawn. I couldn't even be bothered to cry. These petty little attacks were boring. The old chairman had found me a decent family. As long as Ethan didn't seriously cross a line, I could play the part of the perfect baby. Unfortunately, some people just can't leave well enough alone. I was almost a year old, able to toddle a few shaky steps when he finally found his chance. It was a beautiful, sunny afternoon. Mom had just lulled me to sleep and placed me in the middle of her king-size bed in the master bedroom. Thinking I was down for a short nap, she quietly closed the door and went downstairs to the kitchen to prepare some apple puree for me. The room was silent, except for the soundless entry of Ethan. Once he was sure Mom was downstairs, the angelic mask vanished, replaced by a look of pure loathing and jealousy. He walked to the edge of the bed and stared down at me, his 6-year-old face twisted with a horrifying malice. "You little bastard," he hissed, and his hand shot out, slapping me hard across the face. The sting shocked me awake, my cheek burning. Damn, the kid had a strong arm. Before I could even process it, another slap landed on my other cheek. "Why did you have to come here?" "What?" His voice was a choked whisper, squeezed from his throat. "It was all you. You stole my mom and dad. You stole my grandparents. You stole everything that was mine." His fury escalated, and his small hands clamped around my neck, squeezing with all his might. "It will be better if you were dead. If you die, this family will be mine again. I'll be their only baby. Justi. D." The world began to tunnel as my air was cut off. This little punk was actually trying to kill me. I struggled feebly, my tiny arms and legs flailing against him, but my strength was nothing against a determined 6-year-old. Just as I thought this second life was about to end before it even began, a laugh bubbled up inside me. Not because I wasn't afraid of dying, but because of the sheer, bitter irony. "Hey, Mr. Chairman, are you watching? Look at this loving family you worked so hard to find for me. It couldn't even stop someone from trying to murder me in my crib. It's not my fault I was born bad. Some people just insist on dragging me back to my old ways. Fine, if you wanted to play this game, I'd play it with him. Let's see who the real demon dragged up from the depths of hell is." He asked for it. I was happy to oblige. In a split second, he shifted his grip. I gathered the last ounce of strength in my body. Crying was out of the question. That was for amateurs. Besides, if Mom came running and saw this, the game would be over far too quickly. And where's the fun in that? Instead, I stopped struggling. I looked him straight in the eye with a gaze that was eerily calm, almost pitying, with a flicker of mockery. Ethan clearly wasn't expecting that. A 1-year-old on the verge of death wasn't supposed to be smiling. He wasn't supposed to be looking at him like that. He froze, his hands instinctively loosening their grip. Just then, Mom's footsteps echoed from downstairs, getting closer, followed by her gentle voice. "Caleb, are you awake? Mommy made you some yummy apple puree." Ethan recoiled as if he'd been burned. His face instantly morphed back into its innocent, harmless expression. He even had the presence of mind to smooth the collar of my pajamas, as if the vicious little demon from a moment ago was just a figment of my imagination. He leaned in close and whispered a final, venomous threat in my ear. "If you tell Mom, I'll really kill you next time." With that, he scurried out of the room like a frightened rabbit. I lay on the bed, gasping for air. My neck would definitely have marks, and my face was still throbbing. Mom pushed the door open and smiled when she saw my eyes were open. "Caleb, you're awake. Oh my goodness, why is your face so red?" She touched my swollen cheek with a worried frown. Then her eyes widened in alarm as she saw the red marks on my neck. "What happened? Did you scratch yourself? Or did you sleep on something funny?" I looked at her anxious, loving face, blinked once, then my lower lip trembled. I let out a soft, pathetic wah. It wasn't a full-blown scream. It was a heartbroken, whimpering sob. My little body trembled, and fat tears rolled down my cheeks. I was the picture of misery. Mom's heart instantly shattered. She scooped me up, rocking me gently. "Oh, my sweet boy, don't cry, don't cry. Mommy's here." I buried my face in her shoulder, my sobs shaking my small frame. But my hand, my tiny, deliberate hand, pointed directly at the doorway where Ethan had just vanished. Mom followed my gaze, but the hall was empty. She was confused, but her voice was soft. "What is it, Caleb? What are you pointing at?" I just kept crying, nuzzling in her neck, my body still shaking. A flicker of suspicion crossed her face. Her brow furrowed slightly. She remembered seeing Ethan lingering in the hallway just before she went downstairs. But she quickly dismissed the thought. It couldn't be. Ethan was such a good boy. He adored his little brother. She concluded I must have had a nightmare or felt unwell, and held me even tighter, murmuring reassurances. Where she couldn't see me, A small smirk touched my lips. Did you see that, Ethan? This is just the beginning. What you think is the end is merely the prologue. Everything you think I stole from you? Please, from the moment I arrived, nothing in this house was ever truly yours. You like playing the part of the perfect, obedient son? I'll show you that in the face of absolute, unconditional love, all your pathetic little schemes are worthless. You like playing dirty? I'll play right along with you, and I'll teach you what it really means to destroy someone without leaving a single trace. Let the games begin. I leaned into my mother's warm embrace, feeling the gentle rhythm of her hand on my back and listening to her soft, comforting words as I slowly closed my eyes. The stinging on my neck was a stark reminder of what had just happened. Ethan, you better hope the gilded cage the chairman built for me is strong enough to hold me, because the day I break free will be the day your personal hell begins. I'm looking forward to it. My mother hummed a lullaby, her fingers carefully avoiding the red marks on my neck. I could feel her heart beating faster. She was worried but desperately trying to convince herself it was all just an accident. Did my Caleb have a bad dream? She whispered, kissing my forehead. It's okay, Mommy's right here. Just then, the door creaked open. Ethan walked in, holding a cup of water, his face a mask of perfect concern. Mom, I heard Caleb crying. Is he thirsty? I brought him some warm water. A masterful move. I cracked an eye open to watch the performance. The little monster who had just tried to strangle me was now playing the role of the caring big brother. He'd even changed his shirt to hide the wrinkles from his earlier exertion. My mother, as expected, fell for it. Her tone softened immediately. That's so thoughtful, Ethan. But he's still too little to drink from a cup like that. Ethan nodded obediently, placed the cup on the nightstand, and leaned in to look at me. In the one spot hidden from Mom's view, he flashed me a quick, malicious grin. Mom, Caleb's face is so red, he said with feigned innocence. Is he too hot? His words made my mother look closer at my cheeks, her brow furrowing again. The distinct, hand-shaped blush was not something you get from sleeping. I seized the moment. As Ethan leaned closer, I recoiled with a theatrical gasp, burying my face in my mother's chest and starting to tremble violently. Caleb, my mother exclaimed, startled. She patted my back frantically. What is it, sweetheart? I lifted my tear-streaked face, glanced fearfully in Ethan's direction, and then immediately hid again, my cries growing louder and more frantic. The message was unmistakable. My mother's arms tightened around me. She looked at Ethan, her voice still gentle, but now laced with a thread of suspicion. Ethan, while I was downstairs, did you come into Caleb's room? The smile on Ethan's face froze for a fraction of a second before he recovered. No, Mom, I was in my room drawing. I only came over when I heard him crying. He even held up his hands, showing off non-existent paint smudges. See? I haven't even washed my hands yet. Lies. All of it. I watched him from the safety of my mother's shoulder. The kid had nerves of steel, not even flinching under questioning. Oh, I see. My mother seemed partially convinced, but a shadow of doubt remained in her eyes. She patted my back and said to Ethan, why don't you go wash your hands now? Caleb probably just had a nightmare. Ethan nodded obediently and turned to leave. As he closed the door, I saw the cold, challenging look he shot my way. It was a look that said, this isn't over. He was right. It wasn't. I let my sobs subside, sniffling against my mother's shoulder. This was only the first move. That evening, my mother told my father what happened in private. It's just so strange. I heard her whisper from my crib. The way Caleb reacted, he's clearly terrified of Ethan, and those marks on his neck. My father was silent for a moment. Are you sure you're not overthinking it? Ethan is only 6. He's always been such a good kid. Why would he? But how do you explain the swelling on Caleb's face? I checked. There's no way he could have done that to himself. Maybe it was an allergic reaction? A bug bite? My father offered, trying to find a rational explanation. I'll have the doctor come by tomorrow. As for Ethan, I'll keep an eye on him. It was classic adult logic, a refusal to believe a child could be capable of such malice. I rolled over, staring at the soft glow of the night light on the ceiling. It didn't matter if they didn't believe it now. I had plenty of ways to make them. The family doctor arrived the next morning. He examined the bruises on my face and the marks on my neck, his expression growing serious. This doesn't look like an allergic reaction, he said, adjusting his glasses. It appears to be caused by external force. My mother's face went pale. Of course, the doctor added quickly. It's possible he did it to himself by accident. Children this age don't know their own strength. After the doctor left, my mother sat by my bed, her eyes filled with a mixture of heartbreak and confusion. Just then, Ethan made his perfectly timed entrance, carrying a plate of sliced fruit with a sweet smile. "Mom, what did the doctor say? Is Caleb okay?" My mother looked at him, her silence stretching for a long moment. Then she asked directly, "Ethan, I want you to tell me the truth. Did you touch your brother yesterday?" Ethan's eyes widened, and a film of moisture immediately welled up. "Don't you believe me, Mom? I love Caleb so much. I would never hurt him." His voice cracked as if he were about to cry. Does Caleb not like me?" A brilliant way to flip the script. I sneered internally. Time to add some fuel to the fire. Just as my mother was about to be swayed by his performance, I started coughing violently. My face turned a deep red, and I gasped for air as if I were suffocating. My mother rushed to pick me up. I took the opportunity to clutch her shirt desperately, tears streaming down my face, while my eyes remained fixed on Ethan. This time, my fear was so palpable that even my father, who had just walked in, frowned at the scene. "What's going on?" he asked. My mother bit her lip, finally voicing her deepest fear. I think Caleb is afraid of Ethan." Ethan's tears finally spilled over. He ran to my father and buried his face in his legs. "Daddy, I didn't bully him. I swear. I don't know why he doesn't like me." My father patted his back, but his gaze on me was troubled. A stalemate. I knew I needed more definitive proof. So, for the next few days, I put on a show. Whenever Ethan came near, I displayed varying degrees of terror. Sometimes a slight tremble, other times a full-blown meltdown. The peak of my performance came when he tried to hold me in front of the whole family to show what a loving brother he was. The moment his hands touched me, I projectile vomited all over his clean shirt. "What on earth is wrong with this child?" my grandmother finally commented, her brow furrowed with concern. "Why does he react so strongly to Ethan?" My grandfather said nothing, but the way he looked at Ethan was now laced with suspicion. Life started to get difficult for Ethan. Though he tried desperately to maintain his perfect son persona, the family's unconditional trust in him was visibly eroding. He felt the shift, and the darkness in his eyes grew deeper by the day. Finally, on the eve of my first birthday, he snapped. The house was buzzing with preparations for my party, and the adults were all busy. Ethan volunteered to watch me while I played in my playpen. My mother hesitated, but relented after seeing the earnest look in his eyes. "All right, Ethan, you keep a close eye on your brother. I'm just going to the kitchen to check on the cake." The moment her footsteps faded, the smile vanished from Ethan's face. He crouched outside the playpen, his eyes level with mine, his voice a low hiss. "You little bastard. You're getting really good at this acting thing, aren't you?" I sat on the soft mat, fiddling with a toy block, not even bothering to look up. My complete disregard for him was the final straw. "You think this will be enough to get rid of me?" he sneered. "Dream on. I've been in this family for 5 years. You've only been here for 1. I am their son, not you." I finally looked up and gave him a sweet, gummy smile. The smile seemed to stun him for a second. Then I did something that broke him completely. I lifted the hard plastic block in my hand and, with all my might, smashed it against my own forehead. Thwack! A dull thud echoed in the room, followed by a sharp, searing pain. A warm trickle of liquid ran down my temple. I made sure he got a clear view of the blood on my face before I let loose. Wah wah! A blood-curdling scream ripped through the entire house. Footsteps thundered from every direction. My mother was the first to burst in. She saw my blood-streaked face and let out a strangled cry, nearly fainting on the spot. My father and grandparents were right behind her, all of them frozen in horror at the scene. "What happened?" my father roared, scooping me into his arms. I sobbed hysterically, my little hand pointing directly at Ethan, who was still frozen in place, paralyzed with shock. The evidence was damning. The blood, the wound on my head, and the only other person in the room. Ethan. It wasn't me. Ethan stammered, panicking. He did it himself. He hit himself with the block. A 1-year-old child, bashing his own head in just to frame his brother? The excuse was so ludicrous, not even a toddler would believe it. For the first time, my grandfather's face hardened as he looked at Ethan. Ethan, making a mistake is one thing, but lying about it is another. My grandmother was already dabbing at my wound with a napkin, tears streaming down her face. Call the doctor. He's lost so much blood. My mother stared at Ethan with a gaze so cold it could have frozen fire. You have disappointed me more than I can possibly say. Under the weight of their accusations, Ethan finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. It really wasn't me. Why won't any of you believe me? Nestled safely in my father's arms, out of everyone's sight, I allowed a small, triumphant smile to curve my lips. We're just getting started, my dear brother. Your fun is only just beginning. When everyone is convinced you're the bad guy, it doesn't matter if you're telling the truth. And that's a lesson I'm going to teach you myself. The doctor stitched up my forehead while I put on the performance of a lifetime, sobbing and shaking in my father's arms. The cut stung like hell, and the smell of blood was still in the air. Through my tear-blurred vision, I could see Ethan's pale, terrified face. He stood in the corner, pinned by the severe glares of our grandparents, his lips trembling, unable to form a single word of defense. Ethan, you have disappointed me, my mother said again, her voice quiet but as sharp as an icicle. It made him flinch. The warmth was gone from her eyes, replaced by the pain of betrayal and a new, chilling distance. It wasn't me. It really wasn't me. He repeated uselessly, tears smearing his face. This time, they weren't crocodile tears. They were the tears of genuine panic. He had probably never imagined a day when he would be so utterly trapped. My father held me tighter, his face a grim mask. He glanced down at me, his eyes a storm of emotions, pity, anger, and the last crumbling remnants of trust in Ethan. My grandfather let out a heavy sigh, his cane thumping on the hardwood floor. So young, and yet so full of deceit, and you still dare to lie. My grandmother, while gently blowing on my bandage, looked at Ethan with cold disappointment. Ethan, go to the study and think about what you've done. You are not to come out until you're ready to tell the truth. As the nanny led him away, he turned back to look at me, his eyes filled with a poison that could kill. I shrank into my father's neck, giving the perfect impression of a terrified victim. And just like that, the seed was planted. Once trust is cracked, it only ever spiders outward until the whole thing shatters. My birthday party was, of course, canceled. A heavy, oppressive atmosphere settled over the house. The scar on my forehead became my most powerful weapon. In the days that followed, the mere sight of Ethan, even just as back from a distance, was enough to make my lip tremble and my eyes well up as I scrambled for the nearest adult. It worked like a charm every time. Ethan's life became a living hell. He was forbidden from coming anywhere near me. We ate at separate times. He could only play under the constant, watchful eye of an adult. His bedroom, once next to the master suite, was moved to a guest room at the far end of the hall. He grew quiet, sullen, a dark cloud of resentment hanging over him. I would sometimes catch him staring at me with an undisguised hatred, a look of pure loathing. He was biding his time, waiting for the storm to pass. But I had no intention of letting it. A few months later, on a weekend afternoon, my mother was playing with me on the living room rug. My father and grandfather were discussing business on the sofa, and my grandmother was arranging flowers. Ethan sat in an armchair in the farthest corner of the room, pretending to read a picture book, trying to make himself invisible. The time was right. I wobbled to my feet and started toddling in his direction. My mother started to follow, but I turned and gave her a gummy, nonsensical smile. Her heart melted, and she settled back down, thinking I was just exploring. Careful, Caleb. Don't fall. I moved closer and closer to Ethan. He tensed, his fingers tightening on his book until his knuckles were white. He didn't dare move. I stopped at his feet and reached out, playfully grabbing the cuff of his pants. He flinched as if he'd been touched by a hot poker. Every adult in the room was now watching us out of the corners of their eyes. I looked up at him with a look of pure, childish innocence, and, in a whisper only he could hear, I formed a single, perfect word. Loser. Ethan's eyes went wide with disbelief. His expression was a mixture of shock and utter confusion. How could a toddler, who could barely form sentences, say that word with such clear, venomous intent. His hand shot up instinctively to push me away. Before he could touch me, I let out a piercing shriek and threw myself backward with all my might, making sure my head hit the floor with an audible thump. The sound wasn't loud, but combined with my theatrical screaming, it was horrifying. "Caleb!" My mother screamed, scrambling toward me. My father and grandfather leaped to their feet. Ethan was frozen, his hands still raised in the incriminating gesture, his face a mask of pale horror. "Ethan, what did you do?" My father bellowed, his voice like thunder. "I didn't do anything. He fell on his own. He called me a name. He called me a loser." Ethan babbled, his voice cracking with panic. My mother was already cradling me, checking the back of my head. It was probably a little red, but nowhere near as bad as my performance suggested. I cried as if my heart was breaking, my little finger pointing shakily at Ethan. "He called you a name?" my grandfather asked, his voice dripping with ice. "Caleb can barely talk. How could he possibly call you a name? Ethan, are you so desperate that you can't even come up with a believable lie?" "It's true. He said it. He's faking all of this. It's all an act." Ethan screamed, lunging for my father's arm. "Dad, you have to believe me. He can talk. He called me a loser." My father violently shook his hand off, the last shred of warmth in his eyes vanishing. "That's enough. I've heard enough of your insane accusations. Go to your room, and you're not to leave it until I say so." This time, it wasn't just a timeout. It was house arrest. As the nanny dragged a struggling, hysterical Ethan away, his screams echoed down the hall. "He's faking it. He can talk. He called me a name." But to the adults, it was just the ravings of a disturbed and jealous child. My grandmother sighed, shaking her head. "That boy, I don't know what's gotten into him." My mother held me tight, her voice firm and laced with fear. From now on, Ethan is never to be left alone with Caleb. Ever. I buried my face in her shoulder, my sobs slowly subsiding. You see, once you label a child as a liar and a monster, every truth he speaks becomes just another pathetic lie. Are you starting to feel hopeless yet? Ethan, this is only the appetizer. I'm going to personally peel that good brother mask off your face, layer by painful layer, until there's nothing left but raw flesh. After that, Ethan was completely ostracized. He became an awkward, inconvenient presence in the house, someone to be watched and avoided. Even the household staff looked at him differently. His seat at the dinner table was moved to the very end, a silent daily punishment. He became volatile and withdrawn, and when I'd pass him in the hall, I could see the dark circles under his eyes and the suppressed rage simmering just beneath the surface. He was waiting for an opportunity, a chance to either clear his name or destroy me completely. I waited patiently for him to make his move. The opportunity finally arrived on a summer evening, just before my 1.5 birthday. My mother was pushing me in my stroller on a walk through the garden behind our mansion. The setting sun cast a beautiful golden light over everything. Ethan followed from a distance, a silent, ghost-like figure. It was the closest he was allowed to get to me. My mother's phone rang. It was my father calling about some urgent business matter. She glanced around the quiet garden. It was just the three of us. After a moment's hesitation, she waved Ethan over. He froze, then slowly, cautiously approached. "Ethan," my mother said, her tone polite but distant. "I have to go to the study for a few minutes. I need you to watch your brother. Just for 5 minutes. Stay away from the pond. I'll be right back." She parked the stroller on the flat, grassy path, gave me one last look to make sure I was content, and hurried back to the house. The air grew still. It was just me and Ethan. The sunset stretched his shadow long across the lawn, enveloping my stroller. He walked toward me slowly, stopping just in front of the stroller to look down at me. Months of pent-up frustration, anger, and humiliation finally found their release. His eyes were no longer just filled with hatred. They held the desperate, wild look of someone with nothing left to lose. "You little bastard," he hissed, his voice raspy with a strange excitement. "There's no one here to help you now." I sat in my stroller, nibbling on a teething biscuit, and met his gaze calmly. "Why aren't you acting anymore? Go on, pretend," he taunted, his smile turning manic. He reached out, as if to grab my face, but then paused, searching for a more satisfying form of revenge. "Let's see who they believe this time." His eyes darted to the ornamental pond nearby, its surface glittering in the fading light. I knew exactly what he was thinking. A tragique accident. A baby who fell into the water. An older brother who couldn't save him in time. He'd get a slap on the wrist, and I, the thorn in his side, would be gone forever. A stupid, vicious plan, but it was exactly what I wanted. He took a deep breath, his decision made. He gripped the handle of the stroller and began pushing it forcefully toward the pond. The wheels crunched softly on the grass. I watched him, my expression unchanged. I even gave him a little smile. The smile enraged him. He pushed faster. We were getting closer to the water's edge. I could feel the cool, damp air on my skin. 15 feet, 10-3. Just as the front wheels of the stroller were about to go over the edge, I made my move. With all my strength, I hurled the hard, teething biscuit directly at his eye. Ah! He cried out in pain, instinctively letting go of the stroller to clutch his face. In that single, critical moment, I threw my weight to the side, tipping the entire stroller over. Splash! The icy water closed over my head, shocking the air from my lungs. But I had landed exactly where I intended, in the shallowest part, right near the edge. I held my breath, opened my eyes underwater, and watched the panicked figure of Ethan on the bank, clutching his eye in agony. A split second later, my mother's terrified scream shattered the evening calm. Caleb! The sound of running footsteps, shouts, and chaos erupted around us. Before I could inhale a second mouthful of water, a pair of strong hands pulled me from the pond. It was my father. His face was ashen, his suit soaked, and his hands were trembling as he clutched me to his chest. Caleb! Caleb! My mother stumbled over, sobbing hysterically. The grandparents, the staff, everyone was there. I chose that moment to start coughing, spitting up water, and then letting out a wail of pure, unadulterated terror. My small hand pointed a shaking finger at Ethan, who was still frozen on the bank, clutching his eye. My cries were those of a child who had just stared death in the face. Every single pair of eyes in that garden turned on Ethan like daggers. He stood there, his left eye already swelling, staring at me, soaked and screaming in my father's arms. Then at the pond, and at the stroller teetering on the edge where he had pushed it. He was caught, red-handed. The evidence was absolute. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He looked like he was being strangled. My father's eyes were as cold as a winter storm. Ethan Sterling. He said his full name, a sign of ultimate condemnation. He didn't spare him another glance, as if the sight of him was too repulsive to bear. He just held me tight and strode back toward the house, his voice cracking like ice. Get the doctor. Now. My mother followed, her face paler than mine, her hands trembling as she reached for me, but didn't dare touch. My grandparents, supported by the staff, shot Ethan a final look of utter disappointment and disgust before turning away. The doctor confirmed I was fine. I had swallowed some water and was scared, but otherwise unharmed. I was wrapped in a warm blanket in my mother's arms, my sobs reduced to pitiful, exhausted sniffles. In the living room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Ethan was brought in, his left eye now a puffy, angry red, a gift from my teething biscuit. He stood in the center of the room, trembling, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Explain, my father said, his voice low and dangerous. It was Caleb, Ethan whispered, his voice choked with tears. He was trying to reach for a flower. I couldn't stop him in time. Couldn't stop him, my grandfather roared, slamming his hand on the arm of the sofa. The stroller was halfway into the pond. It looks to me like you pushed him. I didn't. Ethan shrieked, finally looking up, his face a mess of tears and genuine terror. It was him. He hit me in the eye with his biscuit, and then he threw himself into the water. He did it on purpose. He can talk. He can curse. He's been faking it all along. He desperately tried to claw his way out, to tell the truth. But the truth was so outlandish, so utterly unbelievable. A 1.5-year-old engineering his own near drowning just to frame his brother? My mother hugged me tighter, her expression hardening into one of pure disgust. How can you still be lying? How can you slander Caleb at a time like this? He almost died. How could you be so evil? It's true. Mom, Aunt, you have to believe me. Ethan cried out, the slip of the tongue, calling her mom in, making his face drain of all color. My father slowly rose to his feet, and walked toward him. His tall frame cast a long, menacing shadow over Ethan, who instinctively stumbled backward. My father looked down at him, his eyes completely devoid of their former warmth, filled only with cold judgment. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Did you do it?" Ethan's lips trembled. Under my father's crushing gaze, his final defense crumbled. He knew it didn't matter what he said. The verdict was already in. He collapsed to the floor, wailing. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to push him close to the edge to scare him. I never meant for him to fall in. He fell on his own." He had confessed. He admitted to pushing the stroller toward the pond. A dead silence fell over the room. My grandmother gasped and turned away. My grandfather closed his eyes, a look of profound weariness on his face. My mother buried her face in my blanket, her shoulders shaking. My father stood over Ethan for a long, silent moment. Then he turned his back on him and spoke to the butler, his voice hollow and cold. "Take him away. From this day forward, he is not to set foot in the main house. He is not to leave the guest house without my permission. And he is never, ever to see Caleb again." This wasn't just house arrest. It was exile, a prison within his own home. Ethan's head snapped up, the color draining from his face. He finally understood what he had lost. "Dad, no, I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. Dad." My father didn't turn around. Two members of the staff came forward and, ignoring his struggles and screams, dragged him out of the room. His desperate cries faded down the long hallway. Finally, there was peace. I snuggled deeper into my mother's arms and closed my eyes. Ethan Sterling eliminated. The battle was over. I had won. Life at the Hayes estate returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the foundations had shifted. I was now protected around the clock. No one ever mentioned Ethan's name again. He was like a ghost, completely erased from the family's inner circle. Sometimes, from my second-floor window, I'd see a small, lonely figure playing by himself in the yard of the guest house, like an abandoned puppy. The staff whispered among themselves about how lucky the young master was to be alive and how twisted that adopted boy had become. Public opinion, as always, sided with the victor. I basked in the double-down love and affection of my family, playing the part of a sweet, clingy, adorable toddler. But at night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. Getting rid of Ethan was just the first step. The chairman had given me this new life, and I had no intention of wasting it on simple family drama. Everything this family had, their entire empire, would one day be mine. Every last bit of it. And any potential threat had to be neutralized. 6 months after Ethan's exile, a rumor began to circulate among the staff. The boy in the guest house was sick. Very sick. A high fever that wouldn't break, and in his delirium, he kept calling out for Dad, Mom, and Caleb. No one dared to report it to my parents. They had made it clear they wanted nothing more to do with him. I was being fed applesauce by my grandmother when my sharp ears caught the whispers of 2 maids in the hallway. "So pitiful. His little face is flushed red. Chill. Don't let them hear you. The master and madam will be furious. The doctor already saw him, right? He did, gave him a shot, but the fever keeps coming back. He just keeps muttering their names." I blinked my big eyes, swallowed the applesauce, and suddenly mumbled 2 words, my voice thick and childish. "Brother." My grandmother's hand froze. "Caleb, honey, what did you say?" I pointed my little finger in the direction of the guest house, my face a perfect picture of innocent confusion. "Brother, sick." The color drained from my grandmother's face. She put the bowl down and hugged me tightly. "Oh, my sweet boy, you're still thinking of him? After everything he did to you?" I just snuggled into her embrace, saying nothing. The elderly are always the most sentimental, especially when faced with the pure, forgiving heart of their biological grandson. That night, just as I predicted, I heard my grandmother talking to my grandfather in a low voice. "The boy has had a fever for days. The staff says he keeps calling for us in his sleep. He brought it on himself. I know, but we did raise him for 5 years. It pains my heart to think of him like that." "Fine," my grandfather sighed. "Have Dr. Miller see him again tomorrow. Tell him to use the best medicine." Mission accomplished. I rolled over in my crib. "Ethan, you're not allowed to die. Not yet. You're far too useful to me." A few days later, on a sunny afternoon, My mother was pushing me through the garden. I started babbling and pointing insistently toward the guest house. "No, Caleb, let's not go over there. Let's go look at the roses," my mother coaxed. I stuck out my lower lip and prepared to cry. She couldn't resist. Believing there was no harm in it with so many staff members around, she reluctantly pushed my stroller toward the guest house. In the small, private yard, Ethan was sitting on a stool in the sun, watched by a stern-looking nanny. He was much thinner, his face pale, and his clothes were old and slightly too small. He stared blankly at the ground. He was a ghost of the arrogant little monster he used to be. He saw us, and his eyes lit up. He tried to stand, but the nanny pushed him back down. He could only stare at my mother with a desperate, longing look. My mother stopped a safe distance away, her expression a complex mixture of disgust, wariness, and perhaps a flicker of pity she herself wasn't aware of. I sat in my stroller and beamed at Ethan, giving him the brightest, most innocent smile I could muster. The sunlight, catching my face, made me look like a cherub. Ethan stared, mesmerized. Then I silently mouthed 4 words just for him. "You. Pathetic. Loser." His pupils contracted violently. The blood drained from his face, and he began to tremble uncontrollably. He pointed a shaking finger at me, a strangled, gurgling sound escaping his throat. "Ghost. He's a ghost. He's lying. He's been faking it all along," he shrieked, leaping from his stool and trying to charge at me like a madman, only to be restrained by the nanny. My mother was horrified by the sudden outburst. She immediately spun my stroller around and hurried away, her face a mask of disgust. "He's lost his mind. Completely insane. We're leaving, Caleb. We are never coming back here again." As she pushed me away, I glanced back. Ethan was still fighting, his screams filled with a desperate, crazed agony. See? It's so easy to break a person. All you have to do is give them a little push when they're already standing on the edge. I leaned back in my stroller, enjoying the warmth of the sun on my face. "Enjoy your new life, Ethan." When the people from the juvenile detention center came for Ethan, I'll never forget the look in his eyes. He didn't look like a 10-year-old boy. He looked like a cornered animal, rabid and ready to take everyone down with him. A brief period of peace settled over the house. My mother's pregnancy progressed smoothly. My father and grandfather were busy handling the legal mess and public explanations regarding Ethan. My grandmother and our housekeeper, Maria, treated my mother like she was made of porcelain. Everyone thought the nightmare was finally over. But I knew better. That final look from Ethan wasn't one of defeat. It was one of anticipation. Sure enough, the peace didn't last. Strange things started happening. First, it was my father's company. A stable, long-running project was suddenly flagged for financial irregularities. The amount was small, but the timing was disastrous, coming right as the company was trying to secure a major round of funding. My father was swamped, and after a thorough investigation, the trail led back to a mid-level manager who had been close to Ethan. The man had resigned just before Ethan was sent away and had since vanished without a trace. Next, my grandfather's old friend, Mr. Davison, stormed into our house, accusing my grandfather of stabbing him in the back by stealing a real estate deal he'd been working on for months. My grandfather was baffled. It turned out someone had impersonated him, leaking critical information to Mr. Davison's competitor. The impersonator used a burner phone, but a voice recording, though distorted, had the distinct cadence of a teenage boy. "He's a ghost that won't stop haunting us," my father said, returning home late one night, his face dark. "He's locked away, but his claws are still reaching out. He must have set all this up before he left." My mother asked him what was wrong. "It's nothing, honey," he said, rubbing his temples. "Just a small problem at work." But the worried look he gave her pregnant belly told a different story. Small problem? I knew better. Ethan's parting shots were just beginning to land. The kid was more cunning than anyone gave him credit for. A few days later, things got uglier. Anonymous posts started appearing on Reddit and Twitter with sensational headlines. The dark secret of the Hayes dynasty. Why an adopted son attacked his pregnant stepmother. Beneath the philanthropy. The vicious truth about New York's golden family. The posts were a toxic blend of lies and twisted truths, painting our family as monstrous. They claimed my parents had abused Ethan for years, favoring their biological son, which drove him to a mental breakdown. They even insinuated that my mother's unborn child wasn't my father's, and that Ethan had been trying to bring justice in his own way. The posts included carefully selected photos. Ethan on his knees, scrubbing a floor, my parents speaking to him with serious expressions, me being showered with gifts at my birthday party. Taken out of context, they created a damning narrative. A troll farm amplified the posts, and the story briefly went viral. Our PR team eventually got it all taken down, but the damage was done. Strangers online were calling my parents monsters. The company's stock took a small hit. "Damn him," my father roared, smashing a teacup. "He wants to ruin us." My grandfather clutched his chest, his face pale, as my grandmother rushed to get his medication. My mother read the vile comments, shaking with such rage that we feared for the baby. A dark cloud descended over our home. A smear campaign? Slander? Is it the best you've got, Ethan? It seems you've been busy in juvie, and you clearly have help. I crawled over to my mother, placing a small hand on her swollen belly. I smirked to myself. You think this is enough to take down the Hayes family? How naive. But this was too sophisticated for a 10-year-old. Someone else was pulling the strings. I decided it was time to go on the offensive. A few days later, my dad took me to visit an old friend of his, a retired cybersecurity expert named Mr. Chun. My dad wanted his help in tracing the source of the online attacks. While the adults talked in the study, I played on Mr. Chin's old desktop computer in the living room. He chuckled, assuming I was just banging on the keyboard. He had no idea that this born-bad soul of mine contained a chaotic knowledge that even the underworld couldn't categorize. Hacking a mortal computer was child's play. My little hands flew across the keyboard. A blur of code filled the screen. Mr. Chun, who had wandered over to check on me, stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened, and his jaw dropped. "Caleb, what? How are you?" I just gave him a toothy grin. No big deal. Just tracing an IP, identifying the head of the troll farm, and finding out which snake is helping Ethan. A few minutes later, I hit enter. A detailed network map, complete with financial transactions, appeared on the screen. It all pointed to a local private investigation firm. The payments to the firm came from an offshore account registered under a false name. But after peeling back a few layers, the account was traced back to someone completely unexpected. My grandfather's disgraced younger brother, the one who had been cast out of the family years ago for embezzlement and had been coveting the family fortune ever since. My great-uncle, Richard Hayes. So, it was an inside job. How the hell did Ethan get in touch with that old scoundrel? I turned the monitor so my father and the stunned Mr. Chan could see. My father's expression shifted from shock to fury, and then to a cold, murderous rage. "Richard, so it was you, you backstabbing old bastard." The truth came spilling out. Richard, bitter about being cut off, had somehow contacted the isolated and resentful Ethan. They made a pact. Richard provided the money and the strategy, encouraging Ethan to cause chaos from within. He promised that if Ethan could ruin my father or cause my mother to miscarry, he would help Ethan take control of the family fortune, with Richard pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Before Ethan was taken away, he passed all of Richard's plans and contacts on. The online attacks, the corporate sabotage, it was all Richard. My father acted immediately. He and my grandfather used every resource and connection they had to bring Richard down. Forgery, corporate fraud, defamation. The evidence was ironclad. The old rat was dragged from his hole and thrown in prison, where he would stay for a very long time. The P.I. firm and the trolls went down with him. The crisis was averted. The company's stock rebounded, and our family's reputation was even enhanced by our swift and decisive handling of the family matter. Afterward, my father and grandfather paid a visit to the juvenile detention center. They told Ethan that Richard was in prison and that their entire plot had been exposed. They said that when Ethan heard the news, he had a complete breakdown, screaming and smashing things in the visitation room until he was restrained. My father simply stood on the other side of the glass and said, "Ethan, the Hayes family raised you for 10 years. We have done more than enough. From this day on, we are done. You are on your own." Betrayed, abandoned, his schemes in ashes, Ethan was finished. At 10 years old, his life was effectively over. True peace finally returned to our home. A few months later, my mother gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Claire. the true pearl of the Hayes family. We all gathered around her cradle, overwhelmed with joy. I looked at my tiny, perfect sister, then at my parents and grandparents, their faces relaxed and filled with a warmth I hadn't seen in years. The sunlight streamed through the window, filling the room. I yawned. Finally, some quiet. Hey, Chairman, you see this? This family is under my protection now. As for my born bad nature, well, when you're dealing with bad people, sometimes you have to get your hands dirty. That's not being evil. That's just cosmic justice. After all, I promised the chairman I'd be good. Or at least, I'd be good at what I do. With Ethan and Richard gone, our family truly began to heal. My little sister, Claire, was a bundle of joy, and our house was finally filled with laughter instead of tension. My father's company thrived. My grandparents seemed to have aged backward. The house finally felt like a home. I, of course, continued to grow, and so did my talents. My badness was now reserved for those who dared to threaten my family's peace. In kindergarten, a little bully snatched a rattle from Claire. I didn't say a word. Later that day, during arts and crafts, I accidentally spilled a bottle of glue on his chair. He was stuck to it for a good hour, screaming his head off. He never bothered my sister again. A distant cousin kept trying to get my dad to give him a cushy, no-show job at the company. One evening, after having too much wine, he started bad-mouthing my father at our dinner table. I tripped while carrying a glass of grape juice, drenching his white designer shirt. "Oh no, cousin," I said with my most innocent, wide-eyed look. "You're all messy. I don't think we have any clothes that would fit you, though." He left in a huff and never came back. My parents knew. My dad would just shake his head and ruffle my hair. "You little monster. At least try to be subtle." My mom would just smile. My grandparents praised me for being such a protective older brother. We never spoke of Ethan again. 10 years flew by. I was 14, in middle school. Claire was 10. We had long since moved to a new, more secure home in a gated community, leaving the ghosts of the past behind. The Hayes family was more respected and successful than ever. I thought the name Ethan Sterling had been buried for good. Then, one afternoon, I came home to find my mother sitting in the living room, a letter trembling in her hand, her face pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. She handed me the letter. "It's from the state. Ethan, he was granted early release for good behavior." My blood ran cold. Good behavior? That manipulative snake? He hadn't been rehabilitated. He'd just gotten better at hiding the monster. "The law is the law," my father sighed. "He has nothing to do with us," my grandfather said, his voice hard as steel. "We signed the papers severing all ties a decade ago." But my mother was worried. What if he comes back? What if he tries to hurt Claire? I took her hand. "Mom, don't be afraid. I'm here. He's nothing now. If he dares to show his face, I'll make him regret it." My voice was calm, but my eyes were ice. 10 years of peace hadn't softened me. It had only given me more to protect. 12 and 13 a few weeks later, we were at the mall, shopping for Claire's birthday. As we waited for the elevator, a voice, both familiar and strange, spoke from beside us. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes." It's been a long time." We all froze. Standing there was a thin, pale young man in a worn-out jacket. It was Ethan. He looked haggard and broken, but the calculating glint in his eyes was still there. "What do you want, Ethan?" my father asked, stepping in front of us protectively. He tried to smile. I just got a job nearby and saw you. I just wanted to say hello." He then did the unthinkable. He dropped to his knees. "I know what I did was wrong. I've spent 10 years repenting. Please, just give me a chance. I'll do anything. I'll work as a servant." His public display of contrition drew a crowd. People started whispering. He was trying to use public sympathy to corner us. I stepped forward. "Are you done with the performance, Ethan?" "Caleb," he stammered, his eyes wide with fake innocence. "Brother, don't call me that. You make me sick," I said coldly. "Have you repented for trying to poison our mother? For trying to kill our unborn sister? For everything?" As I listed his crimes, the crowd's murmurs turned to gasps of horror. "That's not true. It was a misunderstanding," he cried. "A misunderstanding?" I pulled out my phone and played an audio file. The crystal-clear recording from the old security system of him whispering his evil plans to himself 10 years ago. The crowd erupted. Ethan's face went white. He lunged for my phone, but my father's bodyguard, who had been standing by, easily restrained him. The law may have set you free, I said, my voice ringing out, but we will never forgive you. Stay away from our family. The crowd turned on him, yelling insults as security dragged him away. His final, hate-filled glare was a promise of revenge. 14 and 15. A year later, just before a planned family road trip, we learned from our private investigator that Ethan had fallen in with a rough crowd. We knew he was planning something. I told my father we should proceed with the trip. We couldn't live in fear. Besides, if he wanted to fight, I was ready to end this, once and for all. I secretly upgraded the security on our SUV and convinced my dad to hire a discreet security detail to follow us. 7 days into our trip, on a winding mountain road it happened. We had stopped at a scenic overlook. As Claire stood by the railing, a rusty old van suddenly accelerated, hurtling directly toward her. My mother screamed. My father was too far away, but I was ready. I had been watching that van since it pulled up. In a flash, I kicked a heavy, metal umbrella stand directly into the van's path. Crunch! The stand wedged under the front wheel. The van swerved violently, smashing into the stone barrier, its front end dangling over the cliff edge. Claire was safe. The driver was knocked unconscious, but from the passenger side, a bloodied, crazed Ethan emerged, brandishing a knife. "Caleb," he screamed, charging at me. "You ruined my life. I'll take you to hell with me." I met his charge calmly. A simple sidestep, a trip, and a sharp elbow to the back of his neck, and he was on the ground, the knife skittering away. I planted my foot on his back, pinning him down. "Hell," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "You're not worthy of my company." Our security detail emerged and subdued him. The evidence was undeniable. Premeditated attempted murder. He was going away for life this time. As the police led him away, he cursed us. "I'll get you. Even as a ghost, I'll get you. Everything you have should have been mine." I leaned in close. "You couldn't beat me when you were alive," I whispered. "You really think you stand a chance as a ghost? Don't forget, I'm the one even the chairman of the underworld couldn't handle. You're nothing. Enjoy prison." The look of pure terror that finally dawned on his face was the last I ever saw of him. The war that had lasted over a decade was finally over. We finished our vacation. Years later, we heard the news. Ethan had been killed in a prison fight. The day the news arrived, we were celebrating Claire's 18th birthday. We raised our glasses. "To the past being past," my father said, "and to a long, happy, and peaceful future for our family. Cheers." The clinking of glasses drowned out the last echo of a dark memory. I looked at my happy, loving family, and the last traces of the cold, angry bad seed inside me finally dissolved into the warm sunlight. "Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess you won after all. This life, it's not so bad."